I did accounting work for about a year out of college. Didn't really care for the hardcore accounting work. Fell into internal audit, didn't know what it was, fell in love with internal audit. It's the best job in any company. It really is. I mean, there's nowhere you can't go in the company. There's no questions you can't ask. There's nobody you can't talk to. And, fortunate for you, unfortunate for them, sometimes they have to answer your questions. They don't have a choice. And if they don't answer your questions, that's probably because they got a problem in that area. They don't want you to find it.
This episode is brought to you by Green Skies Analytics, an audit analytics service provider that works with internal audit departments that have data analysts and are still frustrated with trying to make analytics actually work, aren't getting the expected ROI, who can't break through the communication barrier between the analysts and the audit team, and those that need experienced direction for an audit analytics strategy and process. Those that feel like they've wasted time and money on trainings, aren't getting the value they want, not prioritizing the highest risk areas for the organizations, or have projects that seemingly never get completed. Do you deal with any of that? If you do, go to the show notes of this episode and click the Green Skies Analytics link, or go to greenskiesanalytics.com to schedule a call and understand how Green Skies Analytics makes analytics actually work for internal audit. This episode is brought to you by Supervisor. Supervisor is a ready-to-use audit analytics platform that integrates with your ERP and any other systems you have to provide actual continuous monitoring for risk across all your transactions. They have more than 350 out-of-the-box checks and analytics to enable your team to perform full population testing, detect multiple types of anomalies, and identify potential fraudulent activity. That's going to give you an unparalleled level of assurance in your financial processes. Built by internal audit and accounting experts, so your team can get value from the first day of usage. So imagine having no analytics today, walking in tomorrow, and having up to 350 audit analytics already run. You don't have to necessarily take my word for it, though. Global organizations such as IKEA, Michelin, Lacoste, and numerous others trust Supervisor to enhance their audit capabilities and increase their assurance.
This podcast is also brought to you by Audit Board, the leading cloud-based platform transforming how enterprises manage risk. Audit Board's integrated suite of easy-to-use audit, risk, and compliance solutions streamlines internal audit, SOX compliance, risk management, and security compliance. Automate processes and improve execution with Audit Board's purpose-built solution, which is designed to address the most pressing challenges of today's practitioners. Experience the latest in audit, risk, and compliance technology. Visit auditboard.com to schedule your product walkthrough to see Audit Board's award-winning platform in action today.
Hey everybody, before we jump into the show, I just want to let you know that the Audit Analytics and AI Conference is September 25th and 26th this year. It's all virtual, so no matter where you are in the world, you can absolutely attend. Recordings are also available, so if you are 12 hours away and don't want to be up at 3, 4, 5 in the morning, you can purchase the recordings. This is the only conference that's strictly about analytics and AI for internal audit. So you're going to get your practitioners' use cases. This thing is practitioner-led, save for one speaker that we had this year, but everyone else is in your peer group, ranging from the largest internal audit data analytics teams in the world down to the individual contributor who spends, hey, I got 50% of my time I can dedicate towards analytics. Each speaker mission is to show you how to actually do what they are talking about. So thought leadership is great, and there will certainly be some of that, but for the most part, that's great. We love the thought leadership. Show us how to actually do it. We are currently at 19 speakers and counting, so we're going to add a few more, and you can get up to 19 CPEs if you attend. Check out the link in the show notes, or you can search for Google theauditanalyticsconference.com, and you can register there. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Audit Podcast. I'm your host, Trent Russell, and today on the show, we have Derry Herring. He's the Chief Audit Officer at Protective Life. I've gotten to know Derry and his team pretty well over the years, and so I knew that they had this initiative to get the new IIA Standards in place by the end of the year, this year being 2024. One of the few folks I knew that was really taking this on. And so I said, hey, it'd be great. Tell us what you learned, basically, and share that with the audience. So that's what a large part of this centers around. How do they implement the new standards? What protocol can others follow to do the same? Derry has a fairly large, relative to internal audit, especially a fairly large team. And so, hey, if you don't have 30 people and you can't, dedicate someone to just doing this, how would you have done it if you had, say, 5 auditors, which is about the average for most internal audit departments? At least what we see most common is around that number. And then also we talk about largest lessons learned. Again, Derry, hopefully you guys made the mistakes we can learn from. And so we wanted to understand what those were. And then lastly, you probably noticed if you listen to the show routinely enough, we've been asking folks lately, hey, what's in your either ChatGPT history or your internet browsing history? And so Derry built some cornhole boards. And so he'd spent a lot of time sourcing information from YouTube and the internet, obviously, to figure out how to do that. And so I said, clearly you're proud of these. Like, we need to make sure people can get a look at these things. So we had Derry send us pictures of those cornhole boards. I think they are very, very impressive. Good use of using the internet for more than just desk scrolling for the most part. All right, everybody. With that said, here we go. All right, so let's start then. What is in either your internet browsing history or your ChatGPT history?
Okay. And great question. So I actually went and looked just so I could respond appropriately. But so I broke it up. And personally, I started building cornhole boards. And so I like playing cornhole. We get together with a big group of guys, my fraternity brothers in Kappa Sigma. Every year, this was our 30th year, so I decided I'm going to surprise everybody by building my own cornhole boards. Because all the other ones I've had have torn up or rotted out in the sun. And so there's a lot of cornhole boards in my history. And building a lot of YouTube videos on cornhole boards. But my takeaways is on your base, use 2x4s, treated lumber. And then on the tops, this is the key. There's a wood out there called acacia wood. It's a hardwood out of like Brazil or China or somewhere, but I use butcher block, acacia wood, so it's inch thick. It's beautiful if you've ever seen butcher block, especially after I put my 6 coats of polyurethane on it. It took about a day to build them and probably about 3 days to put my 6 coats of polyurethane on them, but we went out and played with them last weekend, and they're awesome. So,
perfect.
So that's taken up a good bit.
Well, I'd like to welcome everybody to the Cornhole Board podcast. Real quick for those that are confused. No, that's great. I love that.
I wish I could drag my pictures out and start showing them to you. So,
get them to us. We'll get them out there. We'll make sure people see it. It sounds like you put a lot of work into it. Let's show them off.
Yeah, it was good. But Trent, on the business side, our company started using Copilot not too long ago. I've always been experimenting with ChatGPT. So when I went out and looked at that history, it was all about the new GIS standards. So our department's in a similar situation than a lot of companies. I was up in Nashville a few months, probably a month ago, with a bunch of chief audit executives and their professional practices people in the insurance business. So there's like 30, 35 CAEs there. And the new standards come up, and there was 5 or 6 of them that this is their 5th year. So this is the year that the standards are rolling out in January, but they're up for their EQA this year. How are they going to handle it? And so I don't know if I'm a glutton for punishment, but I was the only one that said, we've already done our own gap analysis, so we're planning on having the EQA kick off around November, December of this year. So we've been working hard to fill our gaps and get everything prepared. So when you look at internet history, it's questions, and especially Copilot, is questions like, how do you comply with the new GIS standards? And then, how do you build a internal audit charter that has a mandate? What's the difference in a mandate and a charter? And so there's all kinds of information and questions around that stuff. So
perfect, because that's what we wanted to talk about. So knowing that you were on this journey well ahead of most folks, I went, all right, there's a lot of people that are going to have questions around this, how to do it, what's the best way to do it. We only have X amount of auditors. Your team is relatively large compared to the average internal audit department. And so how did you do it? And so that's what I wanted to get into. I wanted this to be a practical how-to advice for folks that are going, we're struggling with doing this, or there's probably anxiety in doing this whenever that does come up. And so you kind of being on the forefront of it, how has it been going? How did you implement new standards? What's the protocol others can follow? Advice, lessons learned that you could pass on?
Yeah, no, that's good. And I am no way academia, so this is going to be very at the sixth grade level when I walk you through this. So,
Perfect.
I'm big in the KISS acronym. Keep it simple. I go with two when I talk to myself. Keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah.
So, but we started with a simple Excel spreadsheet, 3 columns, and that's how we've always done our self-assessment. The years that we didn't do an EQA, every other year we do a self-assessment. And column 1, we broke up the standards and the kind of bite sizes, what's required at the different levels. And so second column is what are we doing? So we would put at least 3 or 4 bullet points in there with here's what we're doing to comply with that standard. And so the third column is what's the gap? What can we do different? What can we do better? What can we take from manual to an automated process? What are the gaps that we have? And so that's how we did it year after year after year. So that's how we did the new standards. So when they released the draft standards in March 2023, we knew that we were coming up at 2024. We didn't know when the new standards were going to be effective. So we immediately did the gap analysis, saw what our gaps were. Fortunately, you mentioned I have kind of a large shop. We got 26 auditors. And so we're a fairly mature shop. But going back historically, 17 years ago when I came to Protective, we had 4 auditors. And basically, we tested about 800 SOX controls, and that's what we did. So I did the same thing when I reflect back then. We worked very hard to streamline the SOX program, got it to where it was operating more efficiently. We were truly only testing key controls. And so we were able to free up some resources to then start developing an internal audit charter and then a risk-based methodology. And then we started document policy and procedures. And over the course of about a year or 2 years, we had all the pieces in place. So then we just started maturing those pieces. We had to develop a risk assessment because we didn't have an ERM team at the time. And so as that developed and matured over about 3, 4, or 5 years, it was the 6th year that we did our first EQA. And going through that process, starting with that simple little spreadsheet about what do the standards say, what are we doing, what do we need to do, there was a lot of work around that. It took 2 or 3 years to get us there. Our first EQA, we didn't get all generally conforms. I think we had 1 or 2 that we needed to work on. But we did have 2 or 3 very strong best practices, which was a strategic plan. I've always felt like this. I did it in my prior job. Been doing internal audit for 33 years. I don't remember ever not having a strategic plan. So we followed that strategic plan, and that helped us educate management on what internal audit is, the value we provide. So that helped us mature a lot quicker, I think. But we had a lot of best practices. One was the strategic plan. The other one we put together years ago was something called a roadshow. And on the roadshow, it basically, and I made a list, but it's what is internal audit. So we just used the definition of internal audit. How do we do internal audit work? What is the planning process? What's field work? What's wrap up? How do you report? What is the COSO model? Why do we need? And we went all the way through what is our report? What is our risk assessment? It was about a 15, 16-page document. And we went around the executive management, all of our stakeholders, the board, and basically educated them. Again, it wasn't overnight. It was over a 2 or 3 year period of why internal audit was important and why it's necessary. And I give you that groundwork to go back to in March of 2023 when they rolled the standards out. We put our list together, our 3 columns, and then we started doing our gap analysis. And we immediately started educating management that these new standards were coming. And we went ahead and said, these aren't final, but here's where they're heading. What do you think? And then we took that feedback plus our own opinions, and we replied back to the IIA in the discussion document that they gave us answering the questions. So we provided our feedback. So then at that point, we felt like we had an idea of what standards were probably going to stay in and which ones may or may not change. So we started last year actually updating policy procedures and making changes to start moving toward what we thought the new standards would be. Fast forward to this year when they released the standards, we updated our gap analysis. We did make some changes because when we thought we were going to have stronger language in our charter and our mandate, they loosened it up a little bit. So we backed off a little bit of that. But we did that as we had discussions with our audit committee chair. We did have an audit committee chair change. Our prior audit committee chair retired. So we got a new audit committee chair. So it was another education process, and she was new to our board, but very supportive of internal audit. Comes from a very large shop that also has a strong internal audit function. So that was very helpful as we continue to build out and progress toward it. So that's kind of how we started building. Again, fortunately, we were a mature shop. We have a lot of stuff already in place. But my comparison is we started with a 4-person shop and grew to where we're at today with the same process.
A little off topic, but for the strategy, I feel like that's an area where that's probably not as defined as maybe what you had already had in place. And that's one of the new standards. There's a lot of detail, well, probably not as much as I would have liked to have seen on the why these things need to be in there. But we expect you to have a vision, strategic objectives, assess technology, future state, 2-3 years down the road, that kind of thing. I can see a lot of people, especially with the vision, going, let's just make some, like basically let's just put something down, we'll put it in the desk drawer, and when we need to bust it out, we'll bust it out. With that said, is there within your strategy, is there an element, we'll call it, of that you feel like, hey, guys, if you're going to check the box on everything, that's cool, but you need to do this one thing within that strategy? What would that be?
Yeah, that's interesting you say that. In my corner right here, I can go grab it, hold it up for you if you want. I have 3 boards as our vision, our focus, and our mission. Mm-hmm. And so we hang those in our internal audit conference room up here. They stay there full time. They're in my office right now because these are the ones from about 5 years ago. We have 3 new ones up there because every 3 years we update the vision.
Nice.
And so as we're moving into it, we're finishing our 3-year strategic plan we have. And so we're fixing to redo them now. So I have a group working on a new vision statement, all that. So it worked out to be pretty good timing for this. But I'm a big believer. You got to establish the vision, or you don't really know where you're trying to get to or what you're doing. So the vision statement is very key. I was listening to one of your prior podcasts. I think it was Paul Sobel maybe was speaking about this a little bit. And I agree with him. And I believe Tim Leach made this comment too. I know he was talking really hard on the purpose of internal audit. But I do think the I puts it out there. But you can abide by that, but you can tweak it and put it in your own language to where you're covering what needs to be covered according to the IA. But if you're in an organization where you need to add a little bit more to it because your stakeholders would better, understand it from there. So that's kind of the direction we take. But having that purpose, that vision statement is pretty key.
Perfect. I know, and talking to you and your team prior, when I'd asked this question, like, how are you guys doing this? Like, how are you rolling this thing out? And it was, we have someone basically dedicated. That's their role, is to make sure that new standards are going in like they should be. And so if there's a question, concern, whatever, there's kind of a dedicated resource to a degree. I doubt it was their 40-hour-a-week, job to do that. But you have those resources. A lot of folks, again, I think on average, this is kind of anecdotal, but average like 5 auditors, is the average audit department size or something along those lines. Maybe it's 7. Any advice you could give them? Or they go, we don't really have the resources to do it that way. Is it just, well, start sooner then? What advice would you give based on what you've seen that you could pass on to those folks?
Yeah, and I'll go back again 15, 16 years ago when I first came here. We didn't have a professional internal audit shop and built it from scratch. I was the professional practice person. I was the one writing the methodology. I had the 2 or 3 auditors. Fortunately, 2 of the 4 auditors I had here were experienced auditors that worked at large audit shops similar to me, so they had a background. But it was me. I was writing the risk methodology. I developed the internal audit charter. It was my language. I started with the model audit rule, or not the model audit charter from the IA, but ours looks a little bit different. We got, since nobody at Protective really, from a stakeholder standpoint, had a good understanding of a professional internal audit shop. They thought it was just somebody that come in here and tested SOX controls. And that's what you do. I spent a lot of time, and so our charter already had a good bit of teeth in it, in independence and authority and responsibilities, very well defined. But that was me. I was the one building that when we were a shop before. And so the CAE's got to be willing to roll their sleeves up and do that work. Now, fast forward to the day, I have 26. We just this year with the new standards dedicated one person to professional practices, but they also do our mentoring program, some of our training programs. So they do some other stuff. But right now, for the next 3 to 5 months, they're pretty much dedicated to getting us in compliance and clearing up these gaps.
Any lessons learned, major lessons learned that you could pass on to the listeners from doing this a couple of times now?
The main thing is don't overcomplicate it. I've attended a lot of these sessions from the IIA leaders at the IIA, put them on for CAEs. I'm part of the audit executive. roundtable or council. So there's, I don't know, 1,000 CAEs on this call, that people from the IIA that help write the standards and push them out there, were answering questions. And maybe I oversimplify things, but it just seemed like everybody was just digging into this detailed wording and beating it up and stuff. And, the IIA has a very hard task behind them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think if you keep it simple, you understand you're trying to promote internal audit, you're trying to show that you're adding value. You're given this list of standards that if you follow them, however closely you follow them, you're going to have a very valuable internal audit function. Then is the CAE professional executive enough to go in to have these conversations with the board of directors and the CEO, with the CFO, and relay that value to them so that they get it. But you keep it simple. You start with this 3-4 column spreadsheet, and I'll add one column to the spreadsheet. So if you're a small shop, your first column is going to be what's the detailed standard, break it up. The second one is what is you doing. The third one may be what do I have to do so that I can defend that I'm complying with this portion of the standards. And then the fourth column could be what would I like to be doing. And I do remember having something like that going back 15 years ago. And I would share all 4 columns with my audit committee chair and my CEO and CFO, because they're like, well, why aren't you doing this more aspirational stuff? And I'm like, well, because I got 5 auditors and we got this many controls and we're trying to do this risk assessment and all that. And they're like, well, maybe we need to invest in it a little bit. And so providing that level of information and helping them, you're not giving up independence. You're just showing them what you're trying to accomplish, and you need their administrative help from a resource standpoint to achieve that. And when they see that value in that, Protective has grown over the 17 years, but we've grown very much in line with it. But that's how we've gone from 4 or 5 up to 26 today.
Okay. I know you attended a lot of the knowledge sharing around the standards and who's doing what, how can we do it, what does this mean, et cetera. As you went through it, are there still questions that you have? Like, I still didn't quite understand this, or I was a little confused about this, where others might be in a similar position when they get to that point and they can go, well, Derry figured it out. Let's just go do what he did.
I don't know that I have any silver bullets. Maybe I may defer from answering the question directly, but and I don't mean this to be a pitch for the IIA. One thing I wish the IIA did, and I think they do a lot of it, I just don't know why they're not more successful at it, is when you compare the external audit industry with the internal audit industry, external auditors have, government regulators out there. They got the SEC, the PCAOB, they got the New York Stock Exchange, they got the FDIC. All these people are putting standards in place that the external auditors have to follow. And so then they go in the company has their own regulations about they have to have an external auditor, they have to have an independent audit. So the government regulatory agencies are giving the external auditors the authority and the power they need to do their job and do it independently. When you translate that to internal audit, we have the IIA. There's some regulation out there, SEC, PCAOB, depending on what size you are, New York Stock Exchange, depending on what size you are, they'll say you have to have an internal audit, but they don't tell you how that internal audit has to function. They don't tell you how they have to do internal audit work. And so that's where the IIA comes in. So the IIA is trying to develop a set of standards and framework that no company has to comply with. But so it's a sales mode. The regulators are like, we wrote it, we got it approved, you got to do it. The IIA is like, we wrote it, we documented it. Now we're going to try to help you sell this to the investment community or to the industry, that the respective industry you're in. But the CAEs have to play a big role in that. And again, delivering and selling that to their CEOs or CFOs and audit chairs. So the IIA has a very hard job here. And kind of the takeaway from there is that's the way I think. In this CAE executive session I went to with all these other CAEs, and some of them have the same level of experience and actually more than I do. There were some 40 years. We have a fundamental difference on kind of how to achieve that, because I brought up, I wonder why regulators don't take more of a stronger stance. If they're going to say you have to have an internal audit function, then put some parameters around what that internal audit function has to do. And I had 2 or 3 people push back to say, oh, we don't need any more regulation. We can do this on our own. But then those are some of the same ones that will turn around and beat up on the IIA for not doing a better job. So But the IIA's in a tough spot. I think they do a good job being a nonprofit organization and trying to achieve what they have to have. But I think the people on the front line, like me, you, other CAEs, Fritz Chambers, also Tim Leach, all these other people, I think we're the ones that's carrying the weight that needs to take that run.
All right. I know most of this was around the standards and how you were able to do that, but I'm interested in something you said earlier. I think it would be to a lot of CAEs benefits to get your understanding or get your perspective and your guidance even on this. But you are a 4-person internal audit department, and now you're 26, right? If I have that right. That's a lot of growth right there. A lot of people struggle to get those resources that they need. Any advice you could pass along to those CAEs?
Yeah, I think most audit shops out there, pretty standard, have an audit universe. We have an audit universe of about 130, 135 auditable units. In addition to that, we do the SOX testing for the company as well. So there's a few hundred controls there we test. And we do time accounting in our department, so we track hours. We do it at a very high level. We don't necessarily hold people and put it in their quarterly reviews and stuff like that. But the main reason for tracking that timing is to know how long it takes us to do these audits. On these 130, 135 auditable units, we risk rate those audits. And so we know what 1/3 is the highest risk, what's a medium risk, what's low risk. On the high risk audits, our policy and procedure state, and we try to get in there at least every 2 to 3 years. That have to be a full scope audit, but we at least do some level of work, but we do try to do mostly full scope audits. The medium risk, we're somewhere between 3 to 5 years. And then on our low risk, we're around 5 to 7 years. And so as we're doing that audit work, we're also getting pulled into due diligence work because protected was 25 billion. Now we're 130 to 140 billion. And so we do have just some growth through the company's gotten bigger. We own more companies, so we need people there. But the tougher conversations come when I sit down with our audit committee chair or our CFO or our CEO, and I explained to them that we're getting out of compliance with our standards, and here's some high-level risk audits that we haven't been in 4 years. Here's some medium risks that we have been in 6 years. And the question comes up, well, why haven't you been in there? And the answer is, I don't have the resources because we're doing due diligence work or we get a lot of management requests. If you have a good, strong, experienced internal audit team, different areas in management are going to reach out to you to come in and help them implement new systems, build out new processes, make things automated versus manual. So we get pulled there a lot. And so it's really just a question back to them. I feel like I'm facilitating the standards that we have in place. We all agree those are good standards. Where do they want me to spend my time? And if they want me to spend my time on due diligence work and management requests and other due diligence, other areas, then we're not going to be able to stay in compliance with our standards. Well, they don't want that either. They want to make sure that we're getting good risk coverage because it's risk-based audit work. So we're identifying the risky areas we need to be in. And so that's when we tend to start having those conversations. Well, what level staff do you need? How many more do you need? And we track it every year. We have that information ready to go for discussion anytime it comes up. But typically it's about a 2 to 3 year cycle that as Protective's grown, we realize, hey, we're not fulfilling our standards. So we're going to have to, or our policies. So we're going to have that conversation. And we've been fortunate that, all of our CEO, CFO, audit committee have always been very supportive. And a lot of that has to do with, and here's your key point. If you have a good, strong, experienced team that you invest in that's delivering value-added work, you're probably not going to get pushback when you're asking for resources as long as you're not asking every year.
Perfectly logical.
Yep.
Love that answer. Probably write a book on that. That was good. All right. With that said, what do you want to leave the audience with? We've hit on how to grow a department, which was a little bit, I think, unexpected, as well as the standards itself. But is there anything else that you want to, again, leave the audience with?
Yeah, maybe just a couple of things. Yeah, what we talked about today, support the IA. If you disagree with what the IA is doing, the direction they are, I've never been to any kind of IA meeting where they don't ask, come be a part of it, come volunteer, come join a committee. There's always a need there. I'm dealing with quite a few people there. They're extremely smart people. They've been in internal audit a lot. So, roll your sleeves up and get involved. And then lastly, I've been doing internal audit work for 34 years. I did accounting work for about a year out of college. Didn't really care for the hardcore accounting work. Fell into internal audit, didn't know what it was, fell in love with internal audit. It's the best job in any company. It really is. I mean, There's nowhere you can't go in the company. There's no questions you can't ask. There's nobody you can't talk to. And, fortunate for you, unfortunate for them, sometimes they have to answer your questions. They don't have a choice. And if they don't answer your questions, that's probably because they got a problem in that area. They don't want you to find it. So, but internal audit, to me, fell in love with it. It's the best job in any large company. It's fantastic. So.
Hey everyone, thank you very much for listening to this episode of the Audit Podcast. Whatever platform you're listening on right now, I'm sure there's a subscribe button somewhere, so please hit the subscribe button there. If you're listening through iTunes or Spotify, feel free to go give us that 5-star rating. It only took me about 16 seconds to give myself a 5-star review, and it really helps to get future guests to come on the show, so we'd really appreciate that. Lastly, be sure to check out the show notes and follow us on all our social media channels on Instagram, on LinkedIn, and on TikTok. Also, if interested, please sign up for our weekly newsletter from the Audit Podcast. Thank you all. Have a great one.